What's up, you guys? Welcome back to Let's Go Win podcast. You know, when you meet somebody and absolutely immediately you're like, yeah, they're going to be in my life for a long time. That's exactly what happened with Stephen Scoggins. He is talking about alignment. He is talking about, faith. He's talking about abundance. These are things that I love talking about. And the moment off air we were talking, I was like, okay, this is going to be amazing. So I can't wait for you guys to hear it. Stephen Scoggins is a serial 9-figure entrepreneur, best-selling author, and founder of Unstoppable Solutions. From homelessness to headline-making success, he's built and exited multiple companies and mentored thousands through purpose-driven entrepreneurship. Featured by USA Today and the Wall Street Times, Stephen empowers leaders to scale with soul through his hit podcast, Build, transformational keynotes, and faith-infused frameworks. Well, Stephen, so good to have you on the show, brother. And as we were talking off air, he is in an area that I just fell in love with recently, coming out of North Carolina. What's up, brother? How you doing?
Dude, man, you know how you meet people for the first time and you just get like zoned in. You're like, dude, there's alignment here. There's greatness here. I'm loving every minute of it. So I can't thank you enough for having me on and expose me to your audience, man. Seriously, it's an honor, and I'm super grateful.
Well, I appreciate that. And I agree with you because it was funny. Hey, what are you up to? You're like, did some grounding, did some gym work. I'm like, did we just kind of do the same thing, just in different time zones?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously the highlight is from homeless to 9-figure.
Mm-hmm.
There's a story there, and we don't need the long-winded, but brother, there's something major that transformation that happened between that to what you did.
Sure.
And I know you help a lot of people now get through some of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
How were you like, all right, I am literally at rock bottom, but I know that there's more meant for me. I know that I'm going to bring way more impact to the world.
Well, it's funny. Somebody asked me on a media tour one time. They said, I was on a TV show. This was probably maybe 3 years ago. And they said, hey, what is the legacy you want to leave? And I was like, honestly, I want to be Steve Myrick to as many people as possible. Right now, your audience probably doesn't know who Steve Myrick is unless they've somehow bumped around my content before. But Steve Myrick was my first mentor of all time. He was my dad's employer. At the age of around 17, I dropped out of high school to help my dad and the family pay the bills. We were just not destitute's not the right word for it, but we were hurting. My dad had gotten injured on the job as a construction company and therefore couldn't work. And that process was extended and not really super secure workman's comp kind of stuff like that, just because it's always a portion of what you were getting paid. Anyway, long story short is I meet Steve around that time frame, and I went to work on the construction company amongst other odd jobs. And he would pull me down off the framing crew, and he would put me in his little Jeep Grand Cherokee and ride me around and talk to me. I was telling you off air that he taught me how to flip real estate. That I've been doing real estate for a while. And he told me how to pay for a 7-figure home in cash if I would just follow a process. And he would tell me all kinds of stuff, right? About that. But then I remember this one time, I had just left high school. I met up with him. He was going to put me in business for myself. He got me all the stuff that I needed, literally financially backed me, handled the back office of the administration, stuff like that. And for about a solid year, I just went to work. I had worked hard. I've always been a hard worker. I've always enjoyed working. I was just telling somebody else, working for me sometimes is a little bit like painting, for an artist. Like it's just something you enjoy doing, something I naturally was decent at. And lo and behold, I do like every dumb male does that's never been taught how to handle money or life or relationships. I brag. I have a bunch of dollar bills I'm flipping off everywhere. And, it's my belief, and I'm a person of faith. And one of the things I see all the time is, and we'll come to this in a second, but there's this moment of arrogance and pride that can kick in when you think you have it all figured out, when you're chasing your self-value and stuff and things because everybody around you's told you that will never happen for you because you grew up this way and all that lostness, if you want to call it that. And I meet a 5'6" brown-eyed girl who took me on a ride of my life, ended up brokenhearted. I'm not a big fan of the word depression or depressed but it is an emotional trigger of sorts of kind of heaviness, right? I was in that heavy season for a while, so much so I couldn't sleep and then walking off the job. And then that led me down the next year of life, which was the homelessness, and I found my faith along the way. That story's online if your listeners want to check it out. But essentially, in that grand scheme of things, I found my faith, and 2 days later, I'm back on Steve's job site, and I had this very interesting conversation. Now, I think an interesting point you asked was like, what was the shift? So the shift was Steve had planted seeds in my heart and my mind, but they didn't bear fruit until just about the time I found my faith. So I was in a World's Gym, was a gym chain here in the Carolinas for a while. I don't think they have any activity here in the Carolinas anymore, but and it was the only thing that I still had. It just so happens I had paid for a year in advance early on, so I would shower there, change clothes there. Most people didn't know I was like bouncing around and trying to get shelter on a regular basis. And I just remember looking up one time, I was like, dude, like in the mirror, like getting out of the shower, I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Like, you literally had a multimillionaire coaching you consistently on a regular basis. He told you to do this, 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 and this, and you did the polar opposite of this, 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 and this. And I think that's where I learned the biggest lesson that I think all along a lot of entrepreneurs really struggle with, which is, in order to build a great business, you got to build yourself along the way. And for me, in fact, the biggest I've shared with you privately, that the biggest mistake I ever made in building a business is not building myself. Because every dumb decision I ever made came out of emotional dysregulation. And I don't feel like entrepreneurs fully grasp the importance of understanding how to build their companies, their lives, their relationship from the inside out. Everything, because as entrepreneurs, we're like, we got to get the house, we got to get the car, we got to have the income, because that's going to give us our perfect life. And it's funny, the homelessness journey kind of symbolically was attached to a later journey when I had everything. I had exited. Had everything that I could go anywhere I wanted. I had enough resource to do whatever I wanted. I could travel when I want, all this kind of stuff. And I was probably my most emptiest and unhappy, which is kind of crazy. So I say all that to say that Steve Meyer gave me 2 questions. He gave me a second chance I didn't deserve. That allowed me to start the company that I exited in 2023 from the trash piles. We grew that organization over 25 years, from an unknown company to an industry leader on the East Coast. It was one of the top 4 exterior service companies that had ever been created. And I did that because I chose to build myself on a regular basis. I also chose along the way to tell my team where I was wrong. Let vulnerability begin to lead the way. And, that kind of stuff will kind of hold you at bay. But Steve asked me 2 questions, and I'll shut up. Steve said, okay, question number 1, he goes, what is the difference between a rich man and a poor man? And I was like, well, duh, money. It's money. Of course it's money. And you should have seen his face. You'd have thought he would have smacked me in the back of the head. But at the time I had no understanding about resource, right? And he goes, the next question hit me between the eyes. And this one I want your audience to sit with. Before I say this question, I want the audience to ask themselves, what limiting belief have they allowed to take over their life? Because here's one that hit me for a while. My father had lost his business just before the high school dropout thing and all kinds of stuff. There was a downturn in the late 90s, essentially. And I remember him, he tearful in his eyes. We'd had our house cars repossessed, bankruptcy, house foreclosed, the whole deal. Steve put us in one of his mobile homes, right, to get us by. And my dad, while walking on a job site one day, he said, "Stephen, I always want you to remember, the Scoggins don't get ahead, they get by." Now, what I didn't know at the time was, at least for 400 years, based on all the data I could find through Ancestry.com, right, in the DNA search, there had not been a single Scoggins that was affluent or influential in 400 years. So that was a generational mindset, right? Steve asked me a question. This is probably 6 months later. The first question he asked me was back to back. So he asked me the money question, and then he asked me this question. He goes, "Stephen, do you want to learn to think like me, or do you want to continue thinking like your father?" So I was very fortunate enough, and this is part of the reason why I'm so passionate about helping entrepreneurs really become truly self-aware, because a self-aware entrepreneur can build self-aware teams, and self-aware teams can scale organizations. But it all starts with the entrepreneur, and so many times the entrepreneur is being lost in the journey. So I would say I was very fortunate enough to have a Steve Myrick in my life, which is why I now want to do that. That Steve Myrick moment, full circle later, gave me the courage to go ask for that second chance one more time. And I promised him this: if you give me the second chance, you'll never have to do it again. Now, keep in mind, the second chance he gave me the opportunity. He didn't buy me anything. He didn't do anything. He said, "All right, we'll see. If they don't show up on Monday, you can start that house over there or finish that house, and we'll see how it goes." It was up to me to show up, not knowing on a step of faith if this, prior subcontractor was going to show up. Fortunately, they didn't. My dad and I spent the weekend building the scaffolding out of the trash piles, and the rest is history. So it's a long-winded answer, but that's my heart.
Well, brother, there's a lot to unpack there. First off, I've never met Steve. Not Steven Scoggins himself now, but Steve, your mentor. There's so many good things that he without meeting the man, it makes you want to be a better person, because I was at first, as you were talking, I'm like, gosh, he's a young man that's really letting this stuff sink in. No, like you said, it was in there, it was planted, but it hadn't come to fruition yet. I definitely want to talk about the faith piece, because I think so often people say they have faith, but yet when adversity strikes, that's when they quickly lose it.
Yeah.
And then this mindset piece, brother, I loved the second question he asked. Do you want to think like your father, or do you want to change that? I'm sorry, paraphrasing.
Yeah.
That is so freaking key. So let's just start with the faith thing, because I'm looking behind you and there's a really interesting painting, and I'm guessing I know who it is, but I might be dead wrong. So
that's my dog, Jesus. It's definitely Jesus.
Okay. So it's definitely par for the course when we're talking about faith.
Yeah.
I hear people say faith, I have faith, and I've even said it, and yet deep down, do I really have faith? Or am I worried, concerned? And it's a really, really big word. Talk to me about that, brother. When you found that faith, has it ever wavered since? When you inevitably had those pitfalls, when you had the adversity, when something got screwed up along the way, this is where I find when faith needs to be reinforced, and yet so often this is when people start to lose it.
Yeah, I think the first telltale sign of faith is realizing that faith is not faith until it's tested. Right? Faith is believing in a brighter future when your present circumstances tell you there's no truth to it, right? And has my faith ever been tested? Countless times. I think one of the things that I try to work with entrepreneurs, especially ones who are going through a difficult season in business, is to try to use not the word resilience, but the word recalibration. Right? So many times entrepreneurs like, we're tested constantly in family, in business, in the marketplace, economic downturns, pandemics, it's like constant, right? And 9 times out of 10, isolation sets in, because there's not, your team can come to you and ask you it doesn't matter if you have 2 people on your team or 1,000. They can come to you and ask you a question. You got to have the answer, or at least, can go get the answer, right? And then you look at yourself and like, well, who can I ask questions to, right? Kind of thing. And it's funny, faith to me has become the only teaching ground. It's a fertile ground. Now I intermix, when I look at scripture nowadays, I'm using Jesus as a point of reference. When Jesus is talking about the kingdom of heaven, I can look at Joe Dispenza's work, for example, and see he's actually describing the same thing in terms of quantum, right? So one of the things that's in my heart is how do I articulate the truth of Jesus and my faith alongside of the what most people don't fully understand, which is reprogramming the inner child or the subconscious mind to then elevate yourself. Every major entrepreneur that's ever broken through and done any kind of major, in fact, I think of every major leader, maybe with some of the exceptions of some of the political behaviors, which we won't go there, right, is built on a certain level of crushing, right? I went through an embezzlement thing, or I'll call it a suspected embezzlement thing, because we weren't able to get convictions. A number of years ago, and I'll never forget this African-American lady, she was a good friend of mine. Her name was Dee. She walks up and, and this thing had just happened. I'm about to teach a 3-day event. Literally as this is going, I was notified the night before that this event was taking place. I had, about 100 people coming in to do as an audience. I was supposed to teach for 3 days on stage. So about the worst timing you could possibly have a shakeup like that. And I'll never forget this, because she's walking in and I'm walking up to her, and I'm about to lose it tearfully and like literally start crying. And she says, "Oh no, honey. Oh no, honey. This is the cost of your calling. You can't get to your calling without going through this crushing." And she didn't even know the parameters of it. And a few weeks later, it's probably a few months later, I'm sitting in her house and I'm just saying, I'm still wrecked. I'm having to put this business back together, been thrust back into it, all this kind of stuff. And I was like, hey, if this is what it cost, he can have it. I don't want to be on stage. I don't want to write books. I don't want to be teaching. I don't want it. It's too much. I'll never forget this. She said, oh, honey. She says, now you're ready. Now you're ready. And the reason I share that is because the economy teaches entrepreneurs that they'll fail for a handful of different reasons. The reasons, the same 5 reasons, kind of like, so like they'll just jump up and down. Lack of funding, lack of leadership, poor management team, no product fit, lack of execution, like these types of things. I discovered something really interesting, that I'll be putting in some of my new content and books and stuff in the future, which is it's actually a lot simpler than that. Why entrepreneurs struggle. It's so simple. It's arrogance, ignorance, impatience, insecurity, and fear. If you can get yourself grounded, aligned, and regulated and really kind of like positioned there and recalibrated, and you can do that in the moment, which you cannot do from my perspective without faith. Because there is a certain level of you can use a past experience where something negative occurred, you walk through it, you got refined by fire, and you got to go to the next level, right? So you can take that experience as what we call a confirming experience, okay? Or you can let your past give you continual deconfirming experiences, right? But if you take those 5 things and look in the lens of faith, which is I can control these. I can work on how arrogant I am, how ignorant I am, how impatient I can work on these things. Then ultimately what happens is you get the choice of leveling up. So for me, my faith is the anchor in which all of that is made possible, right? Because the faith by definition is believing in something that doesn't exist. And I don't care who you are. You can be an atheist, you can be an agnostic, you can be whatever faith you have. You have faith. Big Bang Theory requires faith. That somehow out of nothing, some boom, big explosion happened, which doesn't make any logical sense to me. But hey, again, you have to have faith. Like it is the resilience bucket. And if you don't have it, you won't be successful because you're going to live in your past constantly.
Yeah, it is interesting. The 2 subjects that they're not tangible per se. Let's just take the mindset, for instance. You said 400 some odd years, the Scoggins, this was the playbook, right? Like we don't thrive. We just survive is kind of, again, I'm paraphrasing. But it's a 100%, it's this mindset. It's something that you can change. It's not a circumstance until you put yourself into it and you create that circumstance. And I'm hearing the same thing with faith. It's kind of the same idea. The other thing that I think is so funny, oh, honey, as you're just getting your ass kicked and you're going through pain, she's like, this is testing you so that you can go through. I think so often we don't want to hear that, man. Like I will tell you, my wife, she does it to me all the time. She's like, you need to feel this right now. And I'm like, I don't want to. And she's like, all the more reason. So much wisdom in that.
Great wife, by the way.
Oh, dude, you're going to love her. She's a firecracker. There's not a lot of empathy happening, so we're clear. I mean that she's incredible.
She's forcing you to ground is all she's doing.
Brother, she is a rock. You mentioned the 5 things: arrogance, ignorance, impatience, and I didn't get the other 2. What are they, brother? And let's touch on those a little bit.
Arrogance, ignorance, impatience, fear, and insecurity. Okay. Arrogance, I'll give you an example. So if you pull apart arrogance is nothing more than saying, I already have it all figured out. You should listen to me. That actually is a byproduct in many ways of insecurity. Okay. Arrogance also is a way of letting pride and ego drive your behavior pattern rather than what I call emotional regulation, spiritual regulation. A lot of times it's like in fact, and I say this from experience, all 5 of these are things that I mastered the wrong way first and then learned my way out of. So I want to be clear about that. I'm not shaming or guilting anybody. I'm hoping what I do is I'm able to showcase what's possible if you'll face those shadows, right? But arrogance is driven by the ego. It's the need to say and prove your worth more than anything else, rather than simply be present in the moment and understand the environment, the situations, the people, the data, all that stuff around you. Right. So that's kind of a loose snapshot of arrogance. Ignorance, many times, is not knowing what you need to know to move forward, but more importantly, not searching for the answer. Right. So I had a friend of mine, Chris Lacroto. He's met him a number of years ago. He was a close mentor of mine for a number of years. He had 4 questions. I later found out it was from a guy named Tom Patterson, who I believe actually invented the ATM machine. He's like, he'd be almost under 100 by now. But he had these 4 questions that he would use for discernment. And I use these constantly in business, relationships, etc. And they kind of go like this: what's right? What's missing? What's confusing? And what's wrong? And the reason those questions are powerful, because you can look at your life right now, whatever circumstances you're facing, it doesn't matter if it's in business or life, like it doesn't matter. And just sit down with a notepad and pen. You can see, I mean, I've got a notepad here beside me all the time. I'm always jotting things down, iPhone, whatever. And I'll use those questions even today. I'm like, okay, well, what's going right? Okay, well, I can be grateful for that and I can amplify that. Okay, well, what's wrong? Okay, well, these are symptoms of a rooted cause. Which tells me I need to go find the rooted cause, right? What's missing tells me exactly what I need to learn. What's confusing may also be one part mentorship, one part learning, one part discovery process. There's a lot of businesses going to really struggle in probably less than a year, maybe 2 years, because they're not integrating some form of AI into their business model, right? It's changing the game. It just is what it is, right? Well, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't understand it, so I'm not going to go learn about it. I'm like, no, that's the exact thing you need to do, which gets into the part about ignorance, right? Don't be ignorant. Go learn the thing you need to learn to, accelerate your business. So if your leadership is not great, and here's the thing, we know when we're not doing well. Like, here's the crazy thing is our team knows it times 5, right? So if you already feel like you're not leading well, or you're communicating well, or whatever, then fine, go get a massive leadership course. Come and get to know us a little bit. I always teach from my heart and share from my experience, which tends to allow for a lot more vulnerability around the audience and the community. But kind of just as a snapshot. Let me move on. So you got arrogance, you got ignorance, right? Now impatience. I don't know a single entrepreneur that doesn't think they should be further along than they actually are. Not one. Not one. I don't. It's funny. The woman I've been dating now for a little while, things are going great, which is amazing. But she asked me, it's probably a month ago. She said, "I'm just curious. When you sold your company, which, by the way, only 0.2% ever sell a business of entrepreneurs, right? It's a rare occurrence, which I didn't appreciate when I was going through the process, because the process was quite painful. There's a reason they call it due diligence, kind of thing. But what's interesting about that is she said, how did you celebrate when you exited?" And I was like, I don't know. I think I slept in the next day. Like, I didn't celebrate. And entrepreneurs, we don't celebrate the wins because it's funny. We'll celebrate the success formula out in public, but we won't celebrate the sacrifice, and we won't celebrate the small wins, right? The impatience, the way to overcome impatience is by beginning to have a modality of gratitude and thankfulness for where you are, and the ability to understand you are where you are today because that's all you've allowed yourself to be, right? So if you want to go from a 6-figure entrepreneur, you're going to have to learn what 7-figure entrepreneurs do. If you want to go from a 7-figure entrepreneur to an 8-figure, you have to do it. And that's how I did it. I just modeled successful behavior long-term. And then I always would funnel it through the lens of character and integrity and honesty and loyalty. It's like, if I saw somebody who got there well in unscrupulous ways, I chose not to follow them or model them, right? And then along the way, God will share different things with you, about your life, and these 5 things I just mentioned are part of that, right? So that's arrogance, ignorance, and impatience. The next one's insecurity. Right, you're building your business, you're building your life, you're building your everything based on triggers, traumas, and without the transformation. Right, your buddy of mine calls it your walking wounded, and people were like, "Well, I didn't have a bad life. I haven't gone through terrible things." And every time I work with somebody, I can always drill it back to 2 or 3 different things that were traumatic to them, regardless of if it's by definition a traumatic experience, right? And it causes us to live from that limitation. That's why I said early on, it's like, have your audience actually think about, like, watch whatever. It's like, what limiting belief was cast on me that I chose to believe, right? Because that will play into that insecurity piece, which then intensifies the final one, which is fear, right? And again, I have dealt with the fear of failure, and I've dealt with the fear of success.
Mhm.
In fact, when you start putting yourself out there in this world on a continual basis, and you're trying to do what I call serve at scale, right? So I'm on podcasts, on stage, writing books, traveling around, doing whatever I could do to make an impact. You always are going to face imposter syndrome, but then you have to ask yourself, okay, well, what am I imposter of? Right? The reason you feel like an imposter is not because everybody else around you is successful. It's because I think we know that there's a higher self calling us forward, and we feel like because we're not taking this step towards that, we end up feeling like an imposter, not realizing that all we have to do is take a step. And those are those 5 categories. Those are kind of like 5 categories, 5, baby step solutions that will get you moving again. But essentially, when you can conquer those, literally you will live one of the most vibrant, most meaningful, and fulfilled lives you'll ever have in your entire life. You won't need stuff. You won't need validation. You won't need people. You'll just be happy being you, because you came on this earth with divine gifting.
Yeah, no, it's a big subject that we're talking about, because I think that idea is somewhat overwhelming for people. Like, some
Yeah.
people are they're trying to survive, Steve.
Yeah.
It's like, look, man, I just want to
Mhm.
get through the next day, when the truth is you have a greater purpose. Now,
Mhm.
discovering that,
Yeah.
that's going back to the lady. Oh, honey. Like, yeah, man, there's gonna be some shit you gotta
Yeah.
go through. You're gonna go through some bumps and
Yeah.
bruises along the way. It's not sunshine and rainbows. And
Mhm.
even as you talked about exiting, I don't think this is talked about enough. Did you go through a bit of a grieving process when you exited your business? And I asked that
Yeah.
because everybody sees 9 figures and says, "Oh my God, Stephen, congratulations! And they probably say how fortunate you are and
Yeah.
all this stuff. But this is your thing. This is
Yeah.
this blood, sweat, tears.
Yeah.
I think you said 25 years.
Yeah.
I think people don't realize there is a grieving process that's happening. No matter how big the check is,
Yeah.
because now my identity is
Mhm.
going to shift.
Yeah.
Good, bad, or indifferent. I
Yeah.
am no longer the CEO or the founder or whatever. I have
Yeah.
exited. It's no longer mine. How did that feel for you? I know she asked you how you celebrate it. I'm curious
Yeah.
if you went through a little bit of that grieving process.
On the, I think yes, I did. I think it was a little different for me because I had already kind of set up some of my next steps, or at least what I thought my next steps were going to be. Now, a couple of those next steps didn't work out, so that was kind of a real a shell shock to the system. I will tell you, it took about 18 months from the time the exit occurred to the time where I felt like I was still living a normal life. Like, in other words, normal in the context of I have a new mission, I have a new vision, I have something I want to accomplish for the greater good of the world, from my perspective, right? Because once you have an exit, it's like how much money do you need? I mean, I'm not trying to be rude, but it's one of the things I've learned is there's all this striving, all this grinding, all this pursuing. I think, in fact, I would tell you that I think hustle culture must die. Hustle culture is killing people. It's killing relationships. It's killing marriages. It's killing identity. It's causing more pain than good, right? And I learned that both through the creation of the business of not having anything and having to struggle to create something from nothing, and getting to the other side of like, okay, now I have some stuff. Now I've got some, I've got opportunities, but now I still don't feel fulfilled. Like, so that's not the answer, right? So the resource model isn't the answer. For a number of years, to your point, decades, I was like, okay, well, I am the brand, right? I am, at the time, of CHE, the CHE companies is the name of the organization. It was 4 companies rolled up into one. And, I am that brand. Well, then when I stepped away, I had 3 years earlier started to try to like get to the place of making sure the business wasn't dependent on, because you can't sell a company if it's dependent on you without getting royally messed over in the process. So there was a bit of an energetic or a spiritual separation, but at the same time, I still care about how successful the company is. Like, I was just in Raleigh yesterday meeting with the management team because I'm still a board chair because I still own a little bit of equity in the company. And here they are, they're telling me kind of, hey, this is what's going on. This is how we're trying to scale. These are the things. And I'm like, and I get up with a pen and a dry erase marker, and I'm like, okay, well, here's what I'm seeing. Right. And trying to, fulfill the mentorship role. I say all that to say that if what you do is who you are, then you're always going to have an identity crisis. It doesn't matter what you're doing. What you need to do is get centered in who you are, and everything else will come out of you and overflow. And it took me 18 months to kind of figure that out. So to your answer, it's a yes and, right? It's yes. I did go through a process. I underestimated the process, but I did expect it. So I tried to prepare. But yes, the first thing that happened is you keep relationships, like you're here every day, like go do something, like get out of here, kind of thing. So anyway, that's a short answer, or a longer answer to a short question.
No, look, you said something that I totally resonate with. It's funny, so many things you're saying. I'm like, gosh, have we been going through this at the same time?
Yeah.
Hustle culture must die. So the rise and grind and the we're gonna just no matter what, we're gonna win. I've been preaching this, and I say preaching. I've definitely been advocating for what you said, because I don't think people understand. Yeah. Could Steven choose to go sit on a beach and sip Mai Tais?
Boring.
Sure.
Yeah.
But that's not, obviously there's more to life than that. And it's just so funny how people are like, I'm just going to, and I was this guy, by the way.
Yeah,
my wife and I were separated for a year because I was the hustle culture, because I didn't care what got compromised and sacrificed along the way. This is why I think when you say that, I'm guessing you kind of went through something similar, to where it's like, yeah, man, I sacrificed, whether it's time with my kids, my health, my family. And that's what I want to not eradicate. It's going to be impossible. I want to slow that down for others. I want people to realize it's way more than just what's in your bank account. It's way more than whatever accolades are being thrown at you. So when you say hustle culture must die, why, brother? What did you experience that just said, dude, this isn't all it cracked up to be?
I would say that hustle culture encourages insecurity. Okay. And the reason I would say that is because hustle culture, by definition, is the believing the lie that activity breeds results, and successful meaning in results, right? So the more active I am, the more successful I am. It's a lie, right? I'll tell you this, that there's a core difference between a 7-figure entrepreneur and an 8-figure entrepreneur. All right. So 7-figure entrepreneurs, I think, get trapped in hustle culture, right? And unless they find their way out of it, they rarely get to 8 figures, right? And if you look at the statistic, it's really hard to get to 7 figures. It's even harder to get to 8. It's even harder to get to 9. It's even harder to get to 10. Like, I haven't got to 10, right? There's things that I don't know yet to get to 10 figures that I'm hoping to learn one day, right? In the grand scheme of things, the core attribute between a 7-figure entrepreneur and an 8-figure entrepreneur is the principle of focus and compounding. Okay. A 7-figure entrepreneur is hustle, 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 make revenue, make revenue, make revenue, make deals, make deals, make deals, make deals. Doesn't matter what's happening at home. And it's because we think by making the deal, getting the money, doing the thing, that we're going to feel aligned and full. And we go home to our spouse or boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. I'm like, we got all this. We got the house. We're building life, and we're taking a lot of ownership. Like, we feel good that we're now providing well, right? And then you have your son come to you. When my oldest son, and both of the children I have are from a prior marriage that are not biologically mine, but mine all the same. I met them when they were, I think, 10 and 11. And I was very close to them, right? And poured a lot of energy and heart into them. And the oldest one comes to me probably 4 years ago. And, by this time I have a reasonable following on social media. I'm doing YouTube content. I'm speaking. I'm doing these things. My family could have cared less about any of that, right? Now, were they proud of me for putting myself out there and trying to help people? Yes. But my son said this. He said, if there was one thing you could work on, he said, you were a great husband at the time. You're a great father. You're always there for us when we need you, that kind of thing. He said, but there's one thing, if you could work on it, it would mean the world to all of us. I was like, and of course, he's 20 something years old. He just started college at the time. So I was all ears, right? Think about it. Think about the boldness of your son coming to you, telling you about something they feel like you need to work on. It's like, you need to pay attention. And rather than get defensive, like, well, you don't understand, kind of thing. It's like, he said, no, if you could learn to be more present when you're present, like that would make all the difference to us. Mm-hmm. And what I learned was, it wasn't the striving to get all the stuff to make them feel like they had a nice lifestyle. So we're sold a lie that the lifestyle will breed happiness for the entire family. What I've discovered is the family that breeds a lifestyle that makes them happy is a connected family. There's conversations around a dinner table or at a restaurant with no phones, no distractions. There's one-on-one dates with your kids. There's one-on-one dates with your spouse. There's this intentionality of creating a safe and secure environment outside of just creating an income, right? So to me, hustle culture, the reason it must die is because it creates insecurity. It's what's driving like family disruption. It's driving mental disruption. It's driving the limiting beliefs and the insecurity and the arrogance and the fear, because we're like, I got to do this. Oh, no matter what. And then you don't, and then you just grind and you don't even know what you're grinding for. So what's the opposite of hustle culture? I would call it presentness and focus. Spend 20 or 30 minutes every day in prayer, meditation, getting centered. Go operate your mind, your body, and go operate your mind, body, and soul. Like, get up, go to the gym, go for a walk, go for an outdoor hike, go for wilderness, whatever your thing is that allows the divine to talk to you, right? Get centered, get grounded, and then pull out your notepad and make sure your priorities are properly aligned. What I discovered that holds most entrepreneurs back, especially from 6 to 7, and especially from 6 to 8, right, is the inability to prioritize, right? The entrepreneurs that scale large organizations, they get really, really stinking good at prioritizing, of compounding their time, talent, resources, which is how you go from 7 to 8. 7 are all about generation, activity. 8's all about compounding. How do I turn this hour of my time into 3 more hours of time? How do I turn this $1,000 into $10,000, right? How do I take this relationship that's a new relationship and turn it into a lifelong relationship, right? These are ways of compounding, right? So I say that to say that this is, at the end of the day, this is what's driving hustle culture, why it's so destructive, what's at the root of it. But more importantly, the way out is to simply be present in the moment, line up the priorities, and I call it knocking down the dominoes. Start with domino 1, and that should knock down domino 2. And as you do that, and typically I'll give you this one little tad bit, and I'll shut up for a second. The very thing that you don't want to do in your relationships, your life, or your business is the exact thing you need to do. Okay? That is the number 1 domino, right? So we live in a life of resistance. Okay? So this resistance concept, I'm going to resist what's uncomfortable. The more you resist what's uncomfortable, the more you get more of it. You know what I'm saying? So if you can learn to literally just sit in presentness, get deeply centered, and really look holistic. Okay, if I was radically honest with myself, and I was not afraid to avoid things that I know I need to do, what is the number 1 thing I should put almost all of my attention to? Right? And it might be your marriage. It might be your kids. It might not be the next deal or the close or the managing the pandemic or any number of things, right? But if you'll go do that one thing, you'll see that everything else behind it gets easier. Like, you pick up momentum as dominoes fall. But especially with those dominoes that have like really large like pictures and stuff, they set them all up and they knock one over and it knocks everything else around it. Like, I believe we should live life, business, and relationships that way. Getting heavily grounded, getting heavily focused, and knocking down priorities one at a time. And you'll avoid hustle culture. You'll get twice as much done, if not 10 times as much done. And you'll actually be peaceful and fulfilled along the way, rather than, I'm going to get it. It's insane.
Yeah. The one thing that's so interesting to me is it's not the first time it's been said. And yet for some reason, people get so attracted to the hustle culture. Like it's like conditioned in their brain, but to your point, I don't know. I know a few, I don't know if I know official billionaire, fringe billionaires. I've never heard them once say, get up, rise and grind. Never once. Never once.
Compounding.
100%.
Yeah.
And the other thing, as you were talking, I was like, yeah, what you resist persists. And there's a reason that is so true.
Yeah.
And he keeps saying the word grounded. And this is hitting home really, really big for me, because the last couple of weeks, I'm always working on how can I be better? How can I show up better? And the one thing that I keep hearing from people is you need to get more in your body. You're way too much in your head right now.
Yep.
And brother, it has been this
men struggle with it the most, by the way.
Dude.
Yeah.
And because I'm so cerebral most of the time, right? And they're like, get in your body. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Think about why. The reason that men struggle with it the most is because from the day we're born, right? Every piece of media attention that we see, the cartoons, books, the storybooks that we read when we're kids, curious, like there's always an element of the man becoming a bit of a knight in shining armor, right? And in order to face a dragon, you have to focus on the intense moment at play, right? Which means you have to, your body gets avoided because if you were to listen to your nervous system, you're not going to go fight the dragon because the dragon is scary and mean and likely you can't defeat it and all this kind of stuff. So men specifically, I think, struggle with getting into their body, as you mentioned, which is nothing more than realizing what your nervous system is doing, right? So to point out kind of what that is for a lot of folks that may not understand that, it's the ability to say, I feel tension in my arm. I feel tension in my gut, right? And if you can learn to feel the tension and then pay attention to the tension, you can release the tension. And that's what you're meaning by getting into your body and getting grounded. What the best warriors do is, and you'll see this in every major story. Every major story, the warrior that was once the warrior with a sword, one day becomes the guide. Okay, there's a Japanese proverb, and I've got a tank top for a apparel line we're trying to work on right now, just because I'm a gym rat and I like to wear just my own stuff. A little selfish, but I like the branding. Anyway, there's one that we call "Be the warrior in the garden," because the Japanese proverb says, "Be the warrior in the garden, not the gardener in a war." And if you're in hustle culture and you're not in your body, you're always in your head, you're always going to be the gardener in a war. There's always a war. You always feel ill prepared. You don't feel like you have what you need. But if you can get centered, all of a sudden you'll have everything you need at one time. And now you can actually fight a war if needed. But if the more you expect a war to occur, the more your nervous system is going to be put in fight or flight, and you're not going to respond appropriately in fight or flight, period.
Yeah, man, I know a couple people that I need to make sure to connect you with after the episode, because we all are talking this, and I hope it resonates, right? You mentioned a couple people that I think are doing a nice job. You mentioned John Maxwell, you mentioned Joe Dispenza, and I think those are some of the people that have done a nice job building their brand, and they are people that I think we should look up to. And you've been on stages enough to be around some of the others that have built some really, really big brands, and they are not authentic in any way, shape, or form. I won't say it out loud. It's for people to discover on their own, but it is fascinating. I'm going to give you just open form, brother, because here's what I love about the way you answer questions. You arrive at something very simply, and I mean that is the greatest compliment I can give. You ask questions. What's right? What's wrong? What's confused? And what's missing? Those are 4 great questions to use. I want to know what I didn't know enough to ask you, brother, that you want to make sure and share with the audience, because it's been 42 minutes and I'm like, holy shit, the show's almost done. And I could go on for days asking you questions. So what didn't I know enough to ask you, Stephen, that you want to just make sure to get across to the audience?
Well, my greatest heart is to serve, right? So I'm doing what I do now because I feel like what's been put aside of me can help some other people along the way. And if I can help give insight into preventing a divorce because of just bad communication, lack of feeling safe, which is more of an emotional thing rather than a physical thing many times, or if I can give insights into helping someone scale a team, believe it or not, all of this stuff comes down to being aligned. And it's something I believe wholeheartedly in. It's something that has changed the way in which it changed my entire approach to life and business. You're able to scale companies quicker because you're aligned. You're able to do better in your relationships and marriages because you're aligned, because you're seeing things from a different angle. So I think one of the things that I want to do with your audience, if it's cool, is if they want to go to stevenscoggins.com/alignment, there is a quiz there that they can take. It's like less than 5 minutes. It'll help them understand at what method of grounding and regulation they are, and also some practical next steps that they can take to do that. The reason I share that is because what causes us to, I'm going to use this word very, very loosely, right? What causes us to sin, so to speak, which is sin is nothing more than causing problem for yourself and others. Okay. Is the dysregulation. It's the lack of true alignment, right? When you get your mind, your body, and your soul in alignment, and then you get your stages of building the business with the drivers of building a business and with your personal alignment, now you have a machine, right? And for those of your audience who are actually building lives and even wanting to build businesses, I would always say build your business and sell it too. That's probably something else I would share. And the reason is it's going to force you to build it differently. It's going to force you to untie your identity to it, right? And seeing it as a tool, an asset, rather than something of who you are. And it'll begin to separate that journey. And I think I'll share one more quote that Steve Meyer gave me. This has actually been a bit of a it changed the trajectory of my life. And it's funny. My kids tell me all the time I tend to talk in fortune cookie, right? So dropping one-liners everywhere. But this is where it started. Steve Meyer, one afternoon, I had been in business. He had put me, I was back in business for myself. I might have been a month in, still very much doing stuff on my own. And he pulls me down off the crew again, like he'd done so many other times before. He looked at me. He said, "Stephen, you have to be willing to do today what others won't. And you can have tomorrow what others don't." So it goes back to facing, I won't even call it, I hate the word demons. I hate even giving that power in my life. But there is a shadow side, right? There is a yin and yang inside of each and every one of us. And I think one of the purposes of life's calling is to go in and refine the shadow side to be more in line with the light side, right? So face the areas, face the ego, face being stuck in your head, right? And how do you do that? Well, you start going outside and taking your shoes off and standing on the grass for 10 minutes, then turn it to 30 minutes, and then sit on the grass, and then just like let the sun beam on you for a few minutes. It's a form of mindfulness. I mean, it's funny. The Navy SEALs use the same techniques that I use, like box breathing, grounding, regulation. And keep in mind the stresses that these guys have to go through, right? And it's taught to them. Spiritual encouragement, spiritual alignment, all this kind of stuff. So I want to encourage the audience, if there's anything that I've shared that's any value, is I just want to encourage them to find alignment, to fully integrate every aspect of who they are. It's okay to face the shadows. You can face them one at a time. If you need a professional therapist or something to do that, you can do that. I've got people that I work with that actually literally will get me into a meditative state, and we'll literally relive and move things around and give it different meanings to unpack it all. Because you grow up in the environment I did, homeless and all this kind of stuff. You're going to have stuff, right? And that stuff's going to bleed out on your family and your team and your relationships. And it's up to you to deal with the stuff. The cool thing is if you'll deal with the stuff, you become more magnetic. So the very things that you want in your life, like the really fulfilling things, which nobody wants disconnection. I don't care who you are. I've got clients that are 10-figure earners, and we had to rewire how they saw success. And it was then that they saw fulfillment. So alignment is the key to fulfillment, and alignment is also the key to income. So those I think there's some of the random thoughts that come to my heart and mind.
Yeah, brother. I mean, guys, go to stevenscoggins.com/alignment. I'm going to do it afterwards because why not? Why not find your alignment? Because I'll tell you what, it makes life so much easier, more fulfilling.
It does.
It's amazing. He said the word magnetic, and that's exactly what you're going to attract, what you really desire, not what your fears, insecurities, self-limiting beliefs are doing. Brother, you're awesome. I just look forward to more interactions with you. And thank you so much for coming on and just sharing, brother.
Dude, it's simply been my honor, and I hope I added some value for you in the audience, man. I really sincerely want to make an impact and serve at scale and literally be Steve Meyer to as many people as I possibly can. So
it's amazing. Thank you. Okay, so there's some huge things I just have to hit on that Stephen was talking about. The emotional dysregulation. Then he talked about the 5 reasons that entrepreneurs fail: arrogance, ignorance, impatience, fear, insecurity. And then he gave us another framework that you can ask just to see what's going on. What's right? What's wrong? What's confusing? What's missing? He gave just nugget after nugget throughout the entire episode. I just thought it was incredible, an incredible storyteller. So you guys, I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I don't know how you wouldn't. But I would just say, let's make sure if today's episode helped you take one step closer to living your best life, do me a favor, share it with someone who needs it. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you want to go deeper, join the Self community, where high performers go to upgrade their habits, reignite their energy, and finally feel fulfilled. Visit letsgowin.com to learn more. Let's go win together. Appreciate you guys.